Welcome to New World Now, where host Kim Corbin has compelling conversations with authors published by New World Library. They will discuss their personal journeys and share practical tools we can use to be more aware, mindful, and present in our daily lives. Now, here's your host, Kim Corbin.
Life is funny sometimes. Well, I'm thrilled to announce that New World Now recently won the radio show/podcast category at this year's Cover Awards at INATS, the trade show for conscious living. Here I am just a few weeks later with another major announcement to make, which is that New World Now is going on an indefinite hiatus, which means that this will be the last episode of the show in its current form. Unity Online Radio, which is where we've been hosting the show, is going to be focusing less on podcasts and more on establishing themselves as a source for live online entertainment. This means that their hosts are going to be doing live shows on a more consistent basis, which is not possible for me workflow-wise given all the other hats I wear in my role at New World Library. This decision became especially clear after my recent interviews with Yvonne Tolley about breaking up with Busy and Helene Segura about the inefficiency assassin, since they both inspired me to get really clear on what my creative priorities are in comparison to where I spend the majority of my time and energy. I have a wedding to plan and other creative projects that are calling me, so that combined with the changes at Unity are what ultimately led to this decision. I am beyond grateful to have had the experience of hosting this podcast. After I recorded every episode, I would put the book that the show was on my bookshelf in my bedroom. And when I look back at the 35 or so books that I've read from cover to cover to prepare for the show, it feels like I've completed a graduate level course in practical spiritual wisdom, and my life is definitely better because of the experience. My life is also better because of a recent panel that I moderated with three of my favorite authors in the whole world. New World Library co-founder Mark Allen, Susan Ariel Rainbow Kennedy, who's also known as Sark, and Big Love author Scott Stabile. The wisdom they shared is so inspiring and healing that I can't imagine better content for this final episode. What I'll be sharing here is only a portion of the entire conversation, which you can watch in its entirety on New World Library's Facebook page. And I'd also like to encourage you to subscribe to New World Library's YouTube channel, since I will continue to interview our authors on that platform going forward. And now, without any further ado, I present my conversation with Mark Allen, Sark, and Scott Stabile at Copperfields Books in Novato, California. How are you viewing what's going on kind of in the bigger picture in our country right now? Do you read the news? Are you plugged into it? And kind of what's your overall perspective on it?
I don't plug into it all that much, but I do check out every day a little bit, but a little bit is enough. I mean, something good has happened. Trump actually said, okay, the kids can't be separated. He got too much flack from Republicans. So I do check that out, but usually I hear about a minute of the news as I'm driving in, and then flip to Eckhart speaking. Yeah. And I really do, and that's my antidote. I have Eckhart Tolle CDs in my car, and I just hear him talk about letting go. To offer no resistance to life is to be in a state of grace, ease, and lightness. And I say, thank you, universe. This too will pass. This too will pass. Even the political situation will pass. Everything changes. It is cyclical. It is a big pendulum swing. And we were moving in the right direction with our previous president, and then we took a huge, giant step backwards in the evolution of human consciousness. But this too will pass. And there is good that's happening. The kids are getting in the streets again, which we did when Nixon was president. So you could say Nixon had some good results in that the entire generation mobilized and made amazing changes. I think that is happening again.
Thank you so much. I would say that we're in the largest time of change. I've waited my whole life actually for this. This is the toughest, most challenging, amazing time of change, and we've never all been awake on this many subjects at the same time. So that's what excites me, and the current presidency is our greatest spiritual teacher, and also our most challenging spiritual teacher, I would say. It's like the troll that came out from under the bridge and said, I will show you, I mean, it's really, and I think for me, I've become an activist more than ever before, and I found my brand of activism is the telephone. And I am like crazy, I mean, you've never seen, I mean, I am so committed. I have all these calls, I have things on speed dial. I mean, I've learned more about the government and about the local government. I've just gone wild in that direction, and posting and sharing and asking, and it really lit me up, and so again, people are activists now that never were, including me, and so that is causing a groundswell that we can't necessarily see all at once, but it's happening, and there are changes now that couldn't have taken place without all of the challenges that are happening. And so I just really focus there and continue to speak and act and do in different ways. And everybody does it, everyone has their particular brand. I mean, everyone needs to, so I would just say everyone needs to do it the way that works for them. And some people are outward, some people are inward, some people are in the middle somewhere. And also you have to do it in a self-caring way, because if you do it in a way where you're just exhausted and crabby and angry all the time, then you can't do any other good. And so I think that's the part that needs to be said too, but also I think everyone knowing what's, to really get right, like what is something that I can do, and then doing it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I think that there's a lot of darkness. It's a heavy time, certainly, and it's an exciting time when you consider the level of engagement that's happening across our country, and I'm energized by that, and I'm weighted down by the level of darkness and violence and lack of compassion and empathy, certainly. But what I found is that when I get into a place of overwhelm or hopelessness, the best thing I can do for myself, and I feel for our country, is take some sort of action. I think that when we're feeling most hopeless, it's in part because we feel like we don't have the power to affect any real change within the face of all this insanity that's going on. And the reality is we're so empowered just in our kindness, just to step out our door into our communities and interact with kindness and compassion with our fellow citizens and fellow people. Like Sark, I'm making more phone calls than I've ever made in my life to senators, and leaving messages and doing that. And for me, when I'm feeling somewhat despondent and I do that, it helps me. It helps me to feel like I'm not disempowered right now. My voice does matter. And again, I agree that if you're inclined to do something, do it in a way that feels right and good for you. But if you're feeling really hopeless, consider doing something, consider being of service in some way, even if that's just calling up a friend and saying, hey, do you need anything from me? Can I help you paint your room? Getting out of our own heads and our own story and actually active out there in the world in a way that serves others in some way is a powerful, powerful response to what's going on, and it matters.
Thank you so much. Mark, in The Magical Path, you say that there's something that we all can do to make the world a better place, and that by reading the kinds of books that New World Library publishes and doing our inner work, that we are making a difference. So will you speak a little bit to that and offer some perspective to people who might be having a hard time recognizing how they are making a positive difference in the world?
It's not easy to see it, but there is a huge shift in consciousness happening. A huge shift that's global. And it's not as if you encounter this when you walk down the street every day, or we rarely even think about it. But all through history, there have been incredible teachings and teachers that have uplifted so much of humanity. Going as far back as the printed word, Bhagavad Gita, 5,000 years old, teachings that affected people's mind. There's a beautiful line in there that pertains to today called, even in the knocks of life we can find great gifts. So I've learned even from Bhagavad Gita. But all through history, there's been this awakening, but it's been with a pretty tiny percentage of the population. And now, ever since this explosion of the 60s, that has grown. There's been times when, for every 2 steps forward, we've taken a giant leap back, which has just happened politically in this country, as we've been talking. But there is a great awakening going on, and every one of us is part of it. And it just happens. People have used that word meme in a real broad way. Barbara Marx Hubbard or whatever is championing this conscious evolution that's happening. We are evolving. We're moving partnership. And it's a slow process, and every time progress is made, there's all this resistance to it. And that's what we're dealing with now. But it is happening. If we stand back and take the long view, a whole lot has happened in the last 50 years to humanity. When you look at the 50s, for instance, just politically, how white males were in charge, women were secondary, gays were in the closet, minorities were not heard of, white males ran the world. And that led to Vietnam and Nixon and such horrible stupidity that finally the entire younger generation rebelled and said, we're going to come up with a counterculture. We're going to completely change everything. This is going to be a whole new era, an era of higher consciousness, an era of love and partnership with people rather than domination and exploitation. One of my favorite books that really made this clear for me, what I'd just known being through the 60s, was Riane Eisler and The Power of Partnership, showing how the last 3,000 years the dominator model has been pretty well established. The partnership model has always been trying to be born through there. Christ was a huge voice for partnership model. Love one another as I have loved you. Love your enemies. Turn the other cheek. How clearer can you get that there's a new model of consciousness, a new way of relating to each other that is, as Riane Eisler points out, far more powerful in the long run. The partnership model works. Domination and exploitation always leads to more problems. So if you take the long view, things are getting better and better, and we're all part of it, individually and collectively.
Susan, what would you say the most important tool or tools that those of us who want to use our lives to make a positive difference in the world are to have in our toolbox?
Oh, well, I would say connection with what I call your inner wise self. This is higher self, Holy Spirit, pure positive energy, whatever it is that you call it. It's a part of us. Every one of us has it. It's unconditional love for you. And most people know they have this part, but most people aren't consulting with it every day on every subject of their lives. And they need to be. Because that's the part that knows. It's the gut instinct, it's the intuition, it's when you say, oh, I knew that was not good, or I knew that I should go this way or that way. So that's number one. Number two is some kind of inner feelings care, so that you're tending consistently to your feelings, especially the negative ones, so that you welcome all of your feelings into your emotional family, instead of trying to separate them out. Oh, I don't want to feel hate. Oh, I don't want to feel insecurity. I don't want to feel shame. I don't want to feel shyness. Well, guess what? You're going to. And so finding a way to tend to those feelings lovingly, consistently, is life-changing. Third is what I call inner critic care, where you're aware of the critical inner dialogue and you learn how to dismantle it. You learn how to communicate with it. It's not getting rid of those voices. It's re-educating them so that they're not running your life. We're made to have our inner wise selves and ourselves in charge of our lives, not our feelings and not our inner critics. The other piece, I loved what you said, Mark. The other piece that I want to say is I'm excited for all the exposure. All the exposure. I mean, as an abused child, it's so profound. The Me Too movement, what's happening with diversity, where we're all being asked to look at diversity in a comprehensive and holistic way, in a way that we perhaps never have. Feminism, I mean, it's so exciting to see So just joining you in the Longview changes, that's what gets me really excited. And the fact that people are expressing more and more people. And by the way, this includes people that we don't agree with. And I'm not even assuming that everyone in this room is all agreeing. You know, we could have different political views here. So I want to make sure we acknowledge any political view that is here, and that people find ways to talk to each other and find the similarities instead of hating each other's differences. And that's the partnership that Mark just spoke about.
And Scott, in Big Love, you say that nothing stands to transform us, our relationships, and our world more than a commitment to living our lives with love. Will you tell us more about that, please?
Yeah, sure. For me, when I speak about love, I'm speaking about the energy of love. You know, when you go beyond all the noise and insanity of our minds and our egos, and you get to that space that's heart-centered, soul-centered, and it's this loving energy, it's this pure energy, it's this energy that just expands and is abundant and serves all in a positive way. When I speak about love, I'm speaking about the things that love informs in our lives, like kindness, like compassion, like forgiveness, like authenticity, which is, you know, self-love in action. So the idea that, I think we all know this too, that's what I feel certain about. We've all been touched by love. We've all been on the receiving end. We've all been on the giving end. And we all know how powerful that is. And that's why it seems so particularly insane to consider the world and how much justification we all give to straying from love and to going to hatred and judgment and condemnation and all of these things that we know don't feel good to feel inside, and they certainly don't feel good to be on the receiving end of. So to parrot what you were saying in ways that we're communicating with each other, no matter what your views are politically, can we show up to these conversations and these dialogues with compassionate, empathetic hearts? Can we take the time, just a few minutes, to consider each other's experience, to imagine what it's like to walk in one another's shoes, so that what we have to offer the conversation is actually empathy? You know, and only when we're able to bring empathy and compassion do we actually invite an actual communication. And that's the only chance we have of connecting with each other's humanity, instead of just disregarding and condemning one another. And even if, and I know we've all experienced this in this room, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, even if you've been completely offended or disgusted and horrified by certain things that people are saying or writing on social media, how are you choosing to show up in the face of that? We can't ultimately control anything anybody else does, but we have absolute power over how we're choosing to show up in this world. So can we be the examples? Instead of just grumbling about all the hatred out there and the disconnection, are we adding fire to that fire, vitriol to that vitriol, or are we choosing a different way? Are we coming to these conversations with open hearts, you know, ready to love no matter what? And I find that's the most life-changing choice we can make for all involved.
Thank you. Thank you. Mark, in The Magical Path, you say that as soon as our dreams become stronger than our doubts and fears, that our dream begins to manifest.
Yes.
So tell us more about that, please.
The older I get, the more simple I see it. Now, I've been saying there's only two essential things to living the life of your dreams. The two essential things are, one, dare to dream, to have that dream, and two, deal with all the doubts and fears that inevitably come up to undermine that dream. And that's it. It's that simple. You dare to dream. The day I turned 30, I wrote down my dream on paper. I strolled around my little slum apartment. I had no job, no money, no family support, but I turned 30. So I remember this little game I played in this Back to the Land experiment I did in my early 20s. It was a total disaster, but one night we were sitting around a fire freezing because we had no heat or buildings in Oregon winter. And this one couple said, they were this unusually cheerful couple. They said, let's play this game we played at church camp. Let's imagine 5 years have passed and everything has gone as well as you could imagine. What would your life look like? And we went around the fire, and everybody said something. I thought of that game when I was 30. I didn't remember what I said originally at all. I didn't remember one word, so it had no impact in my life. But the day I turned 30, I thought, yeah, they called it ideal scene. What was your ideal scene? I took a sheet of paper and I wrote ideal scene. I dreamed I was 35, middle-aged. But I was living my ideal, and much to my amazement, what spilled out is I have a publishing company that's totally successful and that cruises along. And it doesn't require me to work too hard at all, because I'm in my ideal, I'm lazy. I don't do mornings. I don't do Mondays. I wrote my ideal scene down. I publish all these books and my music, and I dare to dream my ideal. That's the one absolute essential. And the other one is, then of course, doubts and fears flooded me, saying, impossible, impossible. You, Mark, and you got to work 60 hours a week to start your own company. Blah, blah, blah. And I dealt with those doubts and fears. I got around them. One way I got around them, and my books are full of ways, all our books are full of ways to get around it. And we do it all the time. We've been dealing with doubts and fears all our lives. So we all know what to do, really, to deal with them. But one way I got around them, I said, look, doubts and fears. I literally was talking, I said, I'm going to try an experiment. I'm going to go for this dream for a year, but do it in my own lazy way. This really appealed to the lazy side of me, you see. I love musicians' hours. You never do a thing till 1 in the afternoon. Never. So that's what I wanted my life to be. I said, okay, I'm going to work musicians' hours and work only when I feel like it. None of this 40-hour week, but I'm going to start a company, and I'm going to write my books and record my music. And my doubts, impossible, you got to work really hard, blah, blah, blah. I said, look, okay, this is my experiment. Give me a year. Give me a year to try this experiment. They said, it won't work. I said, well, if it doesn't, I won't be any worse off than I am now. I had no job. I had no money at all. There was nothing in the bank. I had, so even my doubts and fears had to say, well, yeah, you're right. It can't get too much worse. So I talked him into letting me try this experiment. And that's how I dealt with doubts and fears. It worked. I only work when I feel like it. I don't feel like it till 1 in the afternoon, ever. And I don't feel like it on Mondays. I don't do Mondays. Mondays are moon days. People are emotional. I take them off. So that's it. Just 2 things. Dream and deal with your doubts and fears. Go for it.
Thank you, Mark. It's true. He doesn't come in until 1 o'clock. And never on Mondays. Scott and Big Love, you say that when we realize that our fear only wants to protect us, and that it's a total dummy, and that it's not going anywhere, we can begin to have different conversations with it. So you talk a little bit about dealing with doubts and fears.
An important moment in my life was when I realized that my fear was actually my friend. I lived most of my life feeling that it was a bully, with its heel on my neck, telling me to, basically preventing me from living the best life possible. But when I listened to my fear for the first time and actually heard why it is in my life, it's to protect me, right? That's why our fear is in our lives. It's to protect us. Fear of being judged. My fear told me it doesn't want me to be judged. It doesn't want me to be condemned or misunderstood. It doesn't want me to get hurt. And then I understood that because it's my friend, I could establish a very different relationship with it. Instead of it being a bully, it's someone I looked at through a friendly lens. And I also started to understand that it's not very smart. Fear doesn't come with a natural emotional intelligence. Your fear, you may want to submit a short story to a magazine. Your fear is going to look at that the way it would look at you running into the middle of the street during traffic. To your fear, it's all danger, don't do it. You could get hurt. So your fear is trying to keep you from any uncomfortable circumstance, which is why anytime you're doing anything outside of your comfort zone, your fear is there to say, don't do it, and these are all the reasons why. So before, I allowed my fear to really control so much of my life and didn't do things, didn't expand beyond my comfort zone, didn't take risks. And now that I look at my fear in a friendly manner, it's more like a nagging little brother, that's how I see it, who's pulling on my pant leg, and saying, don't do that. And I can be like, okay, I hear you, just go play in the corner, And I've also learned that our fear isn't going anywhere. You know, we think we have to wait until we become fearless to take that chance we want to take. And if you're like me, you found that you never got to the fearless point, that that's not real for human beings outside of sociopaths or maybe 2 or 3 year olds. You know, so waiting to become fearless doesn't get us anywhere. And our fear is not going anywhere. It's like that overprotective, nagging parent that's always there and always around. So knowing all these things, our fear is our friend. Our fear is stupid. Our fear is not going anywhere. You know, we can start to approach these circumstances that create fear within us in a completely different way and move forward with our fear, you know, instead of waiting for it to disappear, instead of anything else. And it's not that even when we get in the habit of moving forward with our fear, I wish I could tell you that your fear suddenly disappears. That hasn't been my experience. I do a lot of the same things over and over and over, and whenever I'm doing them, I'm still afraid. But what I have learned and what I've internalized and what my fear has come to understand is that I'm going to do it anyway. You know, that's the very famous book from decades ago, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And the more you do that, you see that it's entirely possible to move forward with your fear. And the more you do that, you see that when you do that, when you stretch your comfort zone in that way and take those risks, that what you invite into your life are myriad possibilities that couldn't have been there otherwise. I mean, so much of the greatest opportunities, connections, so much of the more interesting circumstances in life always happen on the other side of our fear, when we're willing to move forward with it.
Thank you for listening to New World Now with Kim Corbin from New World Library. New World Library publishes books and audios that inspire and challenge us to improve the quality of our lives and our world. For more information about their books and authors, you can visit them online at newworldlibrary.com.